Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of DataTechTalk. I am super honored today because we have Zaved Akhtar, who is the Vice President in Unilever. And this is an amazing opportunity for everyone who is in my network to kind of understand how he has progressed during his Unilever career. And right now, he's driving a lot of the transformational programs in Unilever as well. So Zaved Bhai, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for being here for Data Tech Talk.
Wonderful, wonderful to be here, Shaman. Wonderful.
Amazing. So you are actually, in terms of your journey, I just want to give the viewers a little bit of your background as well. You graduated from IBA, and then you went on to work in British American Tobacco as a brand manager, and then you kind of progressed from there. You joined Unilever also as a senior brand manager, and then you progressed there all the way for 20 years. You were there, and that's amazing. We don't hear all these kind of 20-year journeys anymore as much, so that's really a feat. And now you're actually a vice president of digital transformation and growth at Unilever for South Asia. So please tell us a little bit about your Unilever journey.
Well, personally, I feel like a dinosaur, having been with Unilever for like 2 decades. But it's been amazing for the last 2 decades. It's been wonderful because the bouquet of brands that you work with is just phenomenal. I think that's amazing. The countries and the diverse background of Unilever also makes it very exciting. So every time you've got a new assignment, you start with a lot of excitement, a lot of challenges, and it's an extremely purposeful company. And I believe that the reason you stick to an organization is because its purpose and your personal purpose really connect well. And I think Unilever is one of those companies where it has remained true to the purpose that it was destined for by its forefathers, and it sort of is supporting that. And I think that's what makes me stick around. And I've worked across Asia and across Southeast Asia, South Asia, essentially. And it's been an exciting and amazing journey, having worked with so many types of people, so many type of challenges across marketing as well as business, because I think that's what also kept it fresh. And this last role that I've been doing for nearly about 3 years is a very different kind of role. I mean, I'm a traditional marketer trying to leverage digital and try to transform the organization is an absolutely new skill set for me. It is something that puts me out of my comfort zone, but has been phenomenal learning for me.
Awesome. No, that's really great. And we are here to learn from your learnings. So if you could tell us, for example, within the last 3 years or even more across your Unilever career, how did you approach programs? So digital transformation is one of the programs that, probably parts of many programs combined is digital transformation journeys that is happening in Unilever as well. So if you could tell us, how do you approach it? What are the key things that it's mandatory for you to put in a program?
Well, to be honest, I think digital mm, transformation as a terminology has been a buzz for the last few years. Everybody sort of is doing digital transformation, and to be honest, I don't think anyone has fully cracked it. If you ask me, it's a journey, and I think it's about my personal reflection, having done this role for a few years now. I think the red herring here is always technology, because whenever you do digital transformation, the first thing people ask is, okay, what technology shall I bring in? And I think that's the last thing you probably need to solve for. The first thing I guess what I call is the innovation triad. What you solve for is if you're able to really define your problem, the starting point of my innovation triad. And I think that's always the starting point. Then look at the problem and we're able to define, then look at what competitive edge will you create having done the transformation, what will really change and disrupt you to do it, and finally, having done it, what impact will it bring to your business? And if you're able to really answer these three questions, well-defined problem leading to, okay, for that problem to be addressed, how does this give you a competitive advantage, leading to something for the business, isn't it? Because it has to be an impact on the business. At the moment you're able to define, you actually are able to unlock, because then digital becomes an enabler. And that I think works extremely well. And that's why I always advise that, and I've done this mistake when we go into digital transformation. You've got really exciting toys because digital obviously offers you a lot of fun stuffs that you could do, and you could do a lot of exciting stuffs and then end up doing nothing. The way I look at it is when my kids were growing up and I used to buy toys for them, they used to be super excited with the box of the toy instead of the toy itself. And that only tells me that he wasn't really interested in the toy, he was more interested in the colorful box. So that's how I look at a digital transformation. I think it's important to really make sure you're able to do that, address those innovation trials to drive it. The other thing that happens at your initial stage of any transformation, this will be a disjointed project. There'll be disparate experimentation that you'll do. And one of the things that you really look at that is how can you integrate this? You can connect them together, because what happens is like you need to really make sure all of them work in tandem. It's not in isolation, because one part of the organization you can transform, but if the other part of the organization doesn't, then the whole machine doesn't move. So
Yeah.
that's the other big one that happens, is that how do you really integrate for the organization for you to really transform and change?
Yeah.
I hope
No,
it gives perspective.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like, because I've worked also in the data governance area, I kind of understand how these things, in terms of people, processes, and actually solving for the business problem itself to begin
Yes.
with. That's the kind of approach we want. And you talked a little bit, you touched upon a little bit on some challenges that may happen. So I kind of want to elaborate a little bit more on that. What is the first thing that you always see when we have one is of course being disjointed in terms of communication or approach? What are the other things that you have seen as challenges?
But I think the biggest challenge always is, remember, you're trying to change people, huh? And you're trying to change people on something that for them is not wrong. And you must understand that, huh? Because, which is by the way true. Huh? So if I'm going to change an organization like Unilever and transform, and Unilever has been in South Asia for more than 130 years, it's been in Bangladesh more than 50 years. And suddenly this gentleman walks up and goes to the board and tells you that you need to now change and transform. The first thing they're going to say is, but listen, actually things are fine, which is, by the way, really right. And that's correct. And the reality is, by the way, and this is by a lot around the whole science of change management, change behavior, because essentially human behaviors are very difficult to change, because you're actually running at your most efficient. And the moment you're shifting yourself and you're going to go to the next curve of learning, you suddenly realize that you are inadequate because you were doing something great. Suddenly the organization has changed. Then you need to relearn and re-equip yourself. So the first and most important is this whole mindset of change, because that's always difficult because you're transforming and changing it. And a lot of people think that, okay, you can just en masse change and everything. There's a wonderful, I remember one course I went in, and a professor once told me it starts with one. And it's such a ingrained thing in me. And I can tell you transformation doesn't happen. So when I remember whenever I went and talked about transformation, I used to get a door slapped on my face because people will say everything is good. Why do you want to do these changes? But gradually what happens, suddenly I found one believer in them. They said, okay, whatever you're saying makes sense. And that's why I think that's when it sparked, that it starts with one. And gradually you'll realize you will have a coalition of the willing, because there will always be 2, 3 people. Uh, these are the evangelists that you need to identify in the organization. And once you start doing, then that's when it starts gathering momentum, when you're actually starting to gather the momentum and trying to push that. That's when the transformation happens. So if you ask me of the challenges, the single biggest challenge has never been technology. I don't think ever I had an issue where I have defined a problem and I didn't have a technology. I personally believe technology is already there. It's already invented. I think how do you really create power and power of our minds of what is possible? Because I think the art of possibility, the imagination of possibility is the single biggest thing that we need to build in ourselves. In fact, I personally also believe if I'm doing this transformation, I probably need to be even more futuristic to really figure out what the future will look like. because I also don't think I'm scratching the surface of transformation of business. So that's where the challenges are. So it's a lot softer challenges. Sorry, I couldn't tell you a lot of around algorithm, machine learning, and data scientists, and a lot of those stuffs which you're familiar with, which obviously is a challenge, but these are skills that you can acquire. So if
Exactly.
skills that you can acquire, but the skills of the mind is a very challenging one.
Absolutely. Wow, that was quite inspirational. So I thank you for that. But I would love to know a little bit more. And we are barely scratching the surface, but we would love to know a little bit more about what are as a VP that is driving the entire organization for Unilever in South Asia. What is important to you? What KPIs are important to you? What ROIs are important to you when you invest in a program?
I think this is probably the most debated conversation in any transformation, in any organization, to be honest, that how do you really measure success? And I can tell you, we keep on debating as well. Personally believe, I think there is only three parameters that actually define, or three KPIs that you remember: growth, growth, and growth. These are the three things that you remember. Because if I've done something and if I haven't created impact on the business, and especially in South Asia, because South Asia is such a nascent market. If you look around us, our evolution within FMCG, our evolution across many industries, we are still at a very preliminary stage. We're just about to take off as a country. We are also moving in the right direction. And I think the whole question comes back that how do you really leverage and use that to trigger an open business growth? So all the work that we do in terms of transformation, I think the question, and if you go back to my innovation triad that I spoke about, and
Yeah.
in terms of defining a problem, what competitive edge you can, the third one is what value, and that whole value is around how do I really help business to grow? How do I really help business to deliver its growth objective? So that's why it's always, and it's very difficult, by the way. And I'm in the midst of trying to define that for every dollar that I spend on digital marketing, how do I really attribute that to growth? And what's amazing is everybody thought that digital is a space where you get a lot of data, and hence it should be easier. I think it's more complicated because you got so many data and so many data points, and hence always remember, I think any transformation, any work that we do, at the end, it is about how do you really create an impact on the business. And that's how best to look into any of this.
Right, absolutely, I agree. One of the things you touched upon also was about markets in South Asia. So I want to dig into a little bit about what you see when you look at the market in Bangladesh versus in India versus any other South Asian countries. What are the key differences that you see in between when it comes to whether it's change management, whether it's launching a new brand, whether it's consumerism in general?
If you look at markets in South Asia, and maybe I'll widen it a bit more as well, because South Asia is reasonably an homogeneous cluster. And if you look at how we are in terms of the channels that we market to, it's a predominantly traditional trade channel. So the typical mom and pop stores, the kirana shops, or the mujid dokans are the predominant thing. There is obviously a very growing e-commerce and modern trade that's growing, that's happening structurally, but that's how it's structured. Now, if you look at across South Asia, I think the evolution, the countries are at a different space. So countries like India is probably a few years ahead in e-commerce and modern trade, because obviously structurally the markets are moving more into that. But traditional trade is significantly large. But if I look at markets like Bangladesh, e-commerce and modern trade is still very small. It is very small in context of, and traditional trade is significantly large. And when I mean small, it is not in the range of even double digits. The e-commerce and modern trade are really low single digits. And I think that's the reality. But the other side of the coin is that, listen, structurally, what is happening is we are seeing more growth in e-commerce and modern trade. So it's going to become bigger. I think India has a bit of head start, and then obviously we will actually follow. But structurally, very similar market, but we'll follow. But what it isn't is it is not like a US market, for example, where there is a huge concentration of customers. So there is one or two big customers. Earlier, it used to be only Walmart, but now if you look at it, Amazon and Walmart are really large customers in US. Or for example, if you look at Indonesia, where convenience stores, which is a Indomart or 7-Eleven equivalent has really, really grown in that sort of market. So convenience format in Southeast Asia has dramatically gone up. So there are structurally different markets behave differently. But in reality, what is happening is there are evolution of customer, evolution of consumer that's happening, fragmentation of media. Because even if you look at what is happening in media, media actually, today we are all spoiled for choices. So when I used to be the brand manager 20 years back, there used to be only a Bangladesh television. And I only needed to choose from BTV what programs I will put in. Today, if you look at fragmentation, and I'm sure you probably consume multiple digital media, multiple platforms within that, multiple channels within television, and within television, there's cable, non-cable. Correct. Look at this fragmentation that is happening. So not only a fragmentation of media, there's also fragmentation of the screens because you have become a multi-screen consumer. So there is a laptop, there is a tablet, there is a phone, there is a usual smart TV. Amidst all of this, by the way, there are people who are cord cutters.
Yeah.
Are you aware of cord cutters? So, for example, I haven't. So I don't have a cable connection in the last year and a half in my Bombay home. And the reason being because I looked at it and I looked at my requirements are being fulfilled by any of the streaming medias. So now it has become even more difficult for advertisers to get hold of me. So obviously the evolutions are at different stages. I think India is a bit more evolved in South Asia. I think Bangladesh is around another, by any means, around another 10, 15 years behind. But we will get into it. But structurally very similar. Even if you look at from a consumer space also, we are reasonably homogeneous. I think there are more differences within India than, let's say, if I take the west of India, the east of India. So if you take West Bengal and Bangladesh, there is a lot more homogeneity. If you take south of India and Sri Lanka, there's more of homogeneity. If you take north of India and Pakistan, there's more homogeneity. So that's why South Asia is in a very unique way how you look at, and that's how we look at consumers in South Asia. We don't necessarily look at because a political demarcation is just one way of looking at it. You should look at consumer from their psychographic demarcation and see how that appeals to. And that's how you make your products travel, brands travel across markets.
Love it. I have so many questions buzzing in my head right now, but I'm going to be a little bit more specific. So when it comes to the difference between India and Bangladesh, you mentioned that we are in Bangladesh, we are a little bit behind when it comes to e-commerce and the adaptation of e-commerce in general. Why do you think that's the case? And what can, upcoming businesses, startups, e-commerce platforms do in order to evangelize that adoption?
Yeah, I'll tell you, a lot of time actually the question comes back, what is e-commerce? And everybody believes that it's probably a website where I can just go and buy. I think e-commerce is more than that. The way I look at a successful e-commerce companies has three critical elements. One is obviously commerce, which obviously has. But bigger than commerce, you actually have to have content. You really have to have contextual content that actually really drives you. And the third thing is ecosystem of brands or solutions. Because when you're going in, you're actually going into a shop where, and it literally is, that's what it is. You really need to know the right kind of communication that enables you to make the decision, right? An ecosystem of brands or solution that enables you to drive this. And finally, obviously, you're able to really have brilliant consumer experience on checking out. Now, there are two enablers to it. And I think that those are critical. One really, really big enabler is actually fulfillment. And hence e-commerce at the back end requires huge amount of logistics and fulfillment science. And I think we need to evolve and grow into that fulfillment and logistics science. I think that's all, and especially in a Bangladesh infrastructure, it's quite a bit of challenge. But I'm just saying but Bangladesh is not just a unique market. There are many places. So if I take Bangladesh and if I take Mumbai, the concentration of population and traffic is very similar. And by the way, I've worked across three markets, which are probably the three least livable cities in the world. So I worked out of Manila, and by the way, I love it. Dhaka and Mumbai, and they've consistently been ranked not necessarily the best of places to live. Not at the bottom, but obviously in the bottom rung. and hence it has its own infrastructure challenges. And this, hence, but you need to really design knowing that. And the second element of that one is, I believe, a very important element is consumer centricity and customer centricity. And it's a very interesting space where you really need to figure out, and a lot of time that gets mistaken with customer service. Yes, of course, it has to have brilliant customer service and experience, but I think what is important for that is customer centricity basically tells you that not all consumers are the same. Some consumers are more valuable than the others. And if you really know, how are you able to really then grow, hunt them down and make sure that they are actually sticking to you. So I think there's a bit more opportunity for us. What we have done is the first round of really having uh, created a lot of moats around e-commerce, but I think there's a lot of this back-end work that needs to be done to transform and really make it, as I always say, brilliant consumer experience. Because once you get into brilliant experience, people will never go back and shop.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And that's a really great insight. Fulfillment centers and back-end infrastructure is so important to actually manage the entire supply chain of whatever you are hosting in a front end called a platform, an e-commerce platform.
Yes, yes.
I would love to know from your perspective, for example, how big industries and big organizations like Unilever are managing this COVID period in terms of transitioning, or has it really affected the retail space, or where you are at the moment?
No, listen, this obviously COVID has sort of impacted everyone. And it's something that I always say, something that was coming, but we've ignored. There was a lot of signals of the COVID or COVID equivalent to hit us. And
Yeah.
this is not going to be the last time we're going to get something like this. We will get exposed. And obviously, this has caught many people by surprise. It has really impacted supply lines everywhere in the world. If you look at our supply chain, typically supply chain science is designed on the lowest common denominator. So you really make sure it is the most efficiently designed. It doesn't really have a lot of, as I say, fat in that whole supply system. And hence, you don't have so much of resilience. So at the first pressure, it crumbles. And if I look at what has happened in the last, 9 months, I think that some of the transformation that has happened in 9 months has not happened in the last 9 years. And if you look at today, grandmothers have started to figure out how to have video chats. They would have never had done that. Very small changes, but I think it's a phenomenal change. It's a fact. My mom, I've never been able to really make her do a video chat. And she's now really savvy on that in terms of how do you really do these things. The same way, look at a number of people that have come on e-commerce platform or from Bangladesh's context. If you look at the number of small-scale entrepreneurs who have come on social commerce. I mean, social commerce in Bangladesh was anyway big. I think that has really created. As a result, what has happened, you realize, is let's say in markets like India, a lot of things has gone omni-channel because you can't sort of rely on that. I think that's one has happened. Second that has happened is the resurgence of the Kirana store, the small mom and pop store, because what has happened was because modern and e-commerce are going, you tend to forget all these small shops around you. But suddenly you realize that you can't get out of home, you can't get e-commerce services, then you rely on the small shop next door because you know that he's the only reliable guy and he's going to serve for you. So suddenly you realize the importance of many of these aspects. So it has dramatically changed from a customer landscape. If you look at from a consumer landscape, we're all at home. Look at today. If it were not because of COVID, you and I probably would have been chatting next to each other, correct? And having an informal conversation on this. But look at the number of engagement that has gone in. And hence, all of us are what we call is e-cocooning. So we are cocooning inside the home. And then everything has gone online as much as possible. So that has really, and there is a fear factor that works because now that you step out, you are actually constantly thinking. As a consumer, you are really thinking that if I step out, will I get COVID or not? So there is the inherent fear factor. As a result, you are constantly cleaning your home and surfaces. You're constantly washing hands. We as an organization is the largest educator in Bangladesh about hand washing. But I think in the last 9 months, the number of people that has washed their hands, we wouldn't have been able to wash their hands in 5 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of changes has happened in terms of behavior. People are actually looking for immunity boosting products. So if you look at people are looking at nutritious stuff because they know that if I actually can, if you remember, I heard a lot of people are having a lot more vitamin C. They started to have zinc tablets, a lot of stuff. So if you look at what is happening, we're more indoors, more everything, more looking at immunity protection. So a lot of, and this, by the way, has happened just because of one small thing that we can't see.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's crazy. But well, I would love to speak more to you, but I know that you have a long day ahead, so I'm going to try to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Zaved Bhai, for being here, for sharing your experience and knowledge. If there is someone who's watching and would love to ask you some questions, what's the best way to reach you?
You can reach me. The best way is you can email me, zavedakhtar@gmail.com. You could do that. LinkedIn, I'm at LinkedIn as well. So you can actually drop a message in LinkedIn. I know Bangladesh, a lot of people love Messenger. I'm not an avid user of Messenger, and it's very difficult to find me on many social media. But I'm more than happy if you can drop an email at zavedakhtar@gmail or at LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to reply and respond.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Zaved Bhai, for being here on the show today. I'm really honored to have you here, and I hope that you have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure. Wonderful. You have a great day and wonderful to be speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.